So this is lab 9 for mounting and dismounting tires, and so I want to show you how to do this properly on a lot of the modern vehicles that would have a tire pressure monitoring system sensor inside the wheel. They put those sensors in a couple of different places. Most manufacturers will put the sensor as part of the valve stem, and so you would see a sensor like this installed inside this area, the wheel where the valve stem is. This narrowest section is called the drop center, and that would tuck down inside there and be protected there. Other manufacturers, like I mentioned, Ford will put their sensors not at the valve stem, but if they have a sensor like this, then they will mount it directly opposite of the valve stem. And so they put sensors here at the valve stem and they put sensors there. It's not necessarily true that you could always spot the sensor in the valve stem. So like this one is obvious, it has one. The wheel and tire that I have set up over here obviously has one because you can see the nut that holds the sensor in place. But other styles like this, which is a GM, has a rubber valve stem that would look like a regular valve stem, but it would still have a sensor in it. And so just be careful. They've been putting TPMS systems on cars since 2007, and some of them had it before that. And so we want to make sure that when we're doing our tire work that we don't damage sensors. Sensors can run 30 to 80 bucks a piece. The point of doing tire work a lot of times is because the tire tread is worn out and we need to do tires there. Something's been damaged and on the tire, a cut in the sidewall or anywhere else but the tread, that then necessitates replacing the tire. Other times we're mounting and dismounting tires to do a flat repair or things like that, or to replace and go after a sensor that's no longer working inside the tire. And so that's some of the reasons why we would do this kind of work. Tire work is relatively common. Some of the stuff that I would point out to you that we talked about when we talked about wheels and tires is that whenever there are manufacturers that require a relearn procedure whenever you move the tires or rotate them. A smart thing to do if you want to flat rate this job and do it quickly is to mark, if the vehicle does have a TPMS system that requires a relearn, then mark each wheel as right front, right rear, left rear, and you would write it typically like inside the wheel over here to where I could clean it off, and make a mark to identify which wheel or location each wheel came from. That way when you mount the new tires on, you can put them right back where they came from, and then you don't have to do a relearn. And so that would be the smart thing to do. So I'm going to show you the procedure to mount and dismount a tire that has a tire pressure monitoring system sensor in it, and to prevent from damaging that sensor. And so I want you to pay close attention to how we manipulate this wheel and tire to be able to get it off of the wheel itself, but then also to dodge these sensors. There's several pedals. This is a pretty standard piece of tire equipment. A tire machine here that we've got a pedal here that swings this head in and out. We've got a pedal that grabs and locates the wheel and holds the wheel in place so that pedal will retract out or come in. And then we've got our pedal that rotates it so that we can manipulate the tire and get it off of the wheel. We also have the claw that comes in on the side that we use to break the bead. So that one, when you get a tire and you're going to do tire work, typically while the wheel is still on the car, I'll take the valve stem out. So we'll take the valve stem out, and I'll take it out of all 4 wheels if I'm doing all 4 tires, so that I let the air come out of these to where by the time they get to this tire machine, all the air is already out of the tire. So we'll keep our valve stem if we're going to reuse it, otherwise you throw it away, because when you do mount and dismount tires, you're going to always want to replace the valve stem. So we'll talk about that. As the air comes out of this, whenever you do tire work, always replace the valve stem. Tires are super expensive, and so in comparison to a $2, $3, $5 valve stem. And so you wouldn't want to have a valve stem fail as a weak point, make the tire go flat, and then ruin a tire. So Once all the air comes out of that, then we're going to take it over to this cloth to break the bead. Now, I'm going to lift this up so that we can see it, but because they put sensors here at the valve stem and they put sensors 180 degrees away or opposite the valve stem, we will never break the bead at the valve stem or straight away 180 out from the valve stem. You'll always break the bead at 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock, not 12 o'clock or 6 o'clock to the valve stem, because if we break them here and here, then we'll never crush a sensor with that claw. So be careful about that. Both sides will have to break this bead first. We're going to run the claw in right next to the bead here, and then it's going to come in and break the bead and separate it away from the rim of this wheel. We'll flip it and do the other side. So that's what I'm going to do next. Is break the bead, and be careful to position the tires so at 3 o'clock or 9 o'clock for this claw so that we don't break any valve stems. There's the pedal. So if you have to, sometimes you flip it over and break the bead on the opposite side. As long as you get it separated. Now watching where that valve stem is, we'll break it over here. Keep that valve stem up at 12 o'clock. Just going to work this one a little bit, it's a little bit stubborn. Come on. This one's being stubborn to break this bead. So you got to get it separated so that you don't so that we can dismount it. So I need to get it unseated off of this wheel. You can see how working this claw could damage a sensor, pinch a sensor. I'm gonna get this side one more time. Now I feel confident that I've got it separated. Now, a couple of things I want to show you as we get ready to dismount. So, we're going to use this area of the wheel that's called the drop center to manipulate and get this tire off. This is our narrowest section here. Now, you're always going to dismount the tire from the side closest to the drop center. And so this tire, the drop center is towards the front edge. And so we would mount this tire face down and then clamp that in place like this. And that would hold it in place. We would remove the tire off of this side. Some of your aftermarket wheels and tires that are fancier, the nicer looking ones, you often have to take those off, the 20s and 22s and 24s. Their drop center a lot of times is on the back side, and so to show you how you would mount that one would typically go face down then, and then you would clamp it from the outside in like that, as not to damage the pretty part of this wheel. And so then we would dismount those tires from the backside potentially, okay? So being that that wheel is the same as this one, we're gonna dismount that one from the top side there. We're gonna clamp it from the inside out. So that'll center up here. So then we'll just get some tire soap. We're going to soak the bead area of this tire, which will help us remove it. If you really want to be lazy like me, then I go like this. Now, wherever the wheel weights are, you're going to want to put them back if you're just doing a flat repair. So just as an example, if I was going to do a flat repair so that I don't have to rebalance this tire, I'll make a mark there for this wheel weight, and then I'll put a bead on the valve stem. And I try not to mark it too deep because we're going to want to clean that off when we get done, because nobody wants tire chalk on the outside of their wheel. So then we got to set up the head. So this is referred to as a duck head here. This comes down and just manually adjusts on any of these. You pull them in and out and push up and down on the top of this. And then once I get it into place, then this one airlocks, so I can press that and that'll airlock it. So you want it nice and flush up against the edge of this wheel. The wheel weight we're gonna wanna take off so that it doesn't get hung up on this duck head. So if there's ever any wheel weights on the front side, you use just a pair of wheel weight pliers to pull those off, and we'll save that wheel weight so that we can put it back in the same location. Now, when you're dismounting the tire, we're going to use this area, the duck head, in a pry bar, and we're going to pry the bead up over the top of this. But to protect this, the tire pressure monitoring system sensor, we want that typically at about 11 o'clock. And so if I lift up on this pedal, it'll roll this backwards. And what that does is when I pry this up over the top, then that's gonna help protect and keep the lip of the bead up above the sensor, to where as it peels this bead off, then it doesn't ever put any pressure on that sensor. And so all you have to do is get that pried up over the top, and you just hold this down, and then you hit your pedal, and the machine do the work for you. So we'll spin that around, get for our second bead, we'll get that position right back in the same spot at about 11 o'clock or to the left of that duck head. And then that's why I was working to get that bead up. Get this guy up into our drop center at some point. I don't mind showing you guys, or that you guys see me struggle with some of these, because that's real life. Not all of them are easy or a piece of cake or just fall right off. This is more realistic what it would be like to do an actual wheel and tire, which is why I picked this one. So then we get the bead hooked and pried up over the top. One of the things I want you to notice is that the bead is up above right now where the valve stem is. The valve stem is here, and where I pried the bead, it's now up above the sensor. And so this area pulled in tight to where if that sensor was anywhere over here, then that bead will pull in tight into the drop center and break that sensor. And so that's why we want that sensor over towards this duck head, because as we pry it up, it protects it. And so just push down, it'll peel it off for you. So you can see the area that came out first is the area that has the sensor. Sensor stays protected, no harm there. So now, in typical tire work, if we were going to get a new tire, you swing the duck head out of the way, get rid of your old tire, go get your new tire and put it and get ready to install that after you've put a new valve stem. Now, valve stems, if it's just a standard rubber valve stem with no sensor in it, then we'll come in and just take a pair of pliers and clip the back end of this off, and then you can grab your pliers and pull it through. The valve stems that are like that, then you use your installer, get your new valve stem, tuck it up through the hole. This will thread through and onto the old valve stem, or the new one, and then you pry it up into place with this. It just gives you a little leverage to pull it up and seat it. The ones with a tire pressure monitoring system sensor, you can replace the valve stems on the rubber ones like GM has. They make replacement valve stems for those that you can buy. These make the ones with the nut have little gaskets there that you can replace the gaskets, which I recommend that you do so on any vehicle that you do tire work on. So next, I want you to see the sensor installed in this drop center. So we can see that sensor in the drop center here. So this is what we're going to dodge next. And so we're going to start this sensor out about 7, 8, 9 o'clock, somewhere over in here. If this is 6 o'clock to my duck head, we're going to start it out somewhere over in here so that as we install and that bead tucks into the drop center over here, this sensor would stay protected. And what you'll see is the last part to roll on into place will be coming up underneath the duck head, and that'll roll right over the top of this and never put any pressure on the sensor. And so when you're doing your tire work, you put your new valve stem, do your work there. Then if it's a directional tire, then it would have arrows pointing the direction of rotation. You'd want to make sure that you get that installed inside, outside, the correct direction of rotation. There'd be 2 tires for the left side of the car, 2 tires for the right side of the car. Make sure that you get that right and get your directional tire installed the right way so you don't get it on backwards or something like that. So we'll get our tires soaked up. If you do low pros, you're probably going to want to soap up the rim as well as the bead area of the tire. But on this, I'm just going to soap up the bead. This is not a low pro, so it shouldn't be too bad. So we're going to try to index where our valve stem was and get that started in the right position. So I'll get my duck head moved back over. And actually, before I do that, I need to show you something else. Technique for installing these tires, what we're going to do is we want the lip of the bead on top of this side of the duck head and underneath this side of the duck head. So we're going to kind of angle this tire diagonally on an angle on the top, bead on the top here and underneath over here. And so that duck head, here's another one, and it would be positioned on the tire here. And so to see the side that's facing away from you on that machine is like this. So what we would do is have the bead of the tire on top over here and underneath this side of this duck head. And so you kind of diagonally cut it across, and that will help make sure that that tire, it's the right technique to get the tire installed onto that rim. So pay attention to where my mark for my valve stem is. Get my duck head back in place. And you'll notice that once I set that duck head, I don't have to mess with it. It'll come back to the same spot. So I'm going to just push this around here and get it started. And so you can see the beads tucked right into the drop center here. But all this from the tire, this is where my sensor is there, is protected and no pressure on that. So it'll roll itself on. Some of you guys may have seen people like force and push the tire on. My opinion of that is they're just working too hard. So I'm going to move this back to my 6 o'clock. So this is about 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock over here. So if this is 6 o'clock here, my valve stem is here. So again, position this up on top and underneath over here. Now you're going to have to put some pressure on these if you're doing it all by hand. There is some arms over here, which I'll show you how to use, but you'll put some pressure on those to do it by hand, and I'll show you that first. So I need this to stay set, and actually I almost screwed up. I want to do a better job at getting this valve stem lined up. So just kind of push this down into place. And what you have to pay attention to, all right, is now it'll hold itself. But we need the bead over here to go into the drop center. If it sucks up right here up against where it's going to seal, then you'll tear the bead. And so you need to stop and reset so that you don't tear the bead on this tire. Because if you tear the bead on the tire, it's over. The tire's done. So make sure that that bead does go down into the drop center area. That's what we try to do, is push it down into the drop center. And then what you'll see is that right now it's going to roll right over the top on that bead and never put any pressure over the valve stem where the sensor is. And so that would be the proper way to install that tire. Then if we need to, we slip this back into place to line our valve stem back up with our V, stack our weight back on, air the tire up, you're done. You don't need to rebalance it if it was for a flat repair. If it wasn't for a flat repair and it's a new tire, then what you do there is they'll have a red dot on this tire. You line up the red dot with the valve stem, and that will help to where you don't have to put as much weight on it when you balance it. All right. So I want to show you how to use those arms. Not all tire machines will have arms like that for you to use, but if they do, it'll make your life easier. So if I move this back over to 11 o'clock to dismount, and then take this top bead off. Then I want to get that pop back up so I can show you how we've used those other arms. So I get that back over 7, 8 o'clock. I don't need my bar anymore. If I'm going to use this guy, I don't want that for now. But if I'm going to use this arm, then what you'll do is just use this to help you put pressure on this tire. So this will just roll with you. Bam, bam. So that wasn't the smoothest, because I had the pin locked. But if you let that pin loose, it'll roll a little better. But you can use that arm to help put pressure down. You'll see some people pry down with a pry bar. So we'll line our valve stem back up. Line our valve stem back up there. Tag our weight back on. Over here. And then we're going to air this guy up. So when you air it up, some of them, you want to leave the valve stem out initially when you air this up. Inside here is a blaster. So that blaster will put a puff of air inside here as you start to air it up. As it shoots air out of this nozzle, there's a pedal over here on the side of any of these tire machines to help you air these up. So this one's probably not going to need the blaster, but some of them have a hard time. So the safety part of this that I recommend is to install this guy in here. Just so that if this tire decided to get crazy and blow up, we're about to put in 35 PSI, and that is pounds per square inch, right? I don't know how many square inches are in this tire, right? But that's a ton of pressure, all right? So it's to be respected. If this tire were to blow up, you don't want it blowing up in your face. And so if you put this arm over the top and hold the tire down as you put air in it, then you're at less of a safety risk. The other thing that I want you to notice is there's a gauge back here that I'm going to watch. Obviously, you can't read pressure in the tire while it's pumping air into it. So make sure that you let up off of the pedal when you air these up to know how much pressure is in that tire. So I'm at 20 now. I'm going to air it up a little past 35. And then when you're doing this tire work in the class, I want you to pay close attention to if the bead is damaged. If the bead is ever damaged in this class, go ahead and seat it, but don't put a lot of pressure in it. Put 10 PSI or something like that, something light, enough to seat the bead, and then don't worry about airing it up all the way. So now I'm going to load my valve core into my little core tool, and then I'm going to pop off the air line and thread the valve core in before I lose all my air. For ones that have a TPMS system, there's a special little valve core tool that torques these valve stems. So you can hear it click, tight enough. So then we'll go back to our air line and top it back off at 35. So I'm down to about 32. And you'll notice it fills up a lot slower once the valve core's in, which is why you leave it out when you initially air it up, because it'll go faster. All right, so that's lab 9. Now we'll move on to balancing tires. I'll have a lab activity sheet set up for you in Canvas to complete for this lab.